Hello, my name is Russell Wright from ThemeZoom and NetworkEmpire.com, and today I'm going to answer a Quora question, which is a little bit convoluted, but I'm going to try to refine the question a little bit better. Questions are the answer. So generally speaking, when a question gets too convoluted, it means that it needs to be broken down into several other questions, and they need to be answered independently. But this question is, how does social and marketing versus social and selling, the DNA braid and brand dissemination, work together? This question has a lot of different contexts, because anybody reading this question wouldn't know what a DNA braid is unless they understood our software and application. But I'm going to point out that the writer of this question, I think, is Stephen M. Brooks, and he clarified down here that it was requiring context, which is that the DNA braid, for those uninitiated in the concept, NetworkEmpire.com, which is our research and our natural language processing and LSI application. So in order to get into this question, I'm going to answer it with pre-existing dialogue and process. I'm going to first of all comment on a couple of things. The question was changed already, so the answer that Eric Newman gave was that instead of concerning yourself with ethics, consider whether the forum you're posting has group rules and the rest. I agree that ethics was not a major issue. This is why I think the question was changed. And this points out an interesting thing about Quora, is a question can be changed even after an answer is given, and that is something worth paying attention to. But what I'd like to say is that all context is sales. And a better question for Stephen to be asking is, what is the difference between direct selling and indirect selling? If you take things too literally, such there's no such thing as sales, what you're really saying is there's, on social media, what you're really saying is there's no such thing as direct sales. And if you're saying that if you're talking about the DNA braid, the problem with that is that the DNA braid is not relevant to social media versus SEO. Okay, DNA braid is a DNA braid whether you're using the one feed to rule them all system, whether you're using global branding. For example, a branding empire is very, very different than a technical online empire. And this is where you need to understand the difference. Personal branding and SEO are not the same thing. Curation and social media are not the same thing. Therefore, you got to begin to break down your systems and your definitions and understand. In order to emphasize this point, I'm going to reveal a story that I showed already on Storify.com. I've renamed it, for the convenience of this post, this Quora question, Content Curation, Social Media, and Indirect Sales. My point that I'd like you to pay attention to is that Donald Trump said leadership is sales. Leadership of any kind, whether it be thought leadership, brand leadership, the rest. Almost all social media is just noise going out there. And an example of leadership would be somebody coming up with the right question and leading with a question that matters, for example. May the best question win. And then the answer to that question is also very, very useful. So for example, if you provide an amazing question or an amazing answer to a question, and you place it in the appropriate context, and that context helps somebody get closer to an answer, then that is a form of indirect selling. It affects both the brand and ultimately product sales. You may not be saying, hey, buy this product, but you might be saying, hey, I'm extremely knowledgeable and passionate authority, coach, speaker in this area. And because of that, you should probably listen to me. You don't come out and say, hey, you should probably listen to me. Your authority is contextual. So really, context itself, digital context, is indirect selling. That probably would be the best way for you to understand the difference. And the question that you're asking really has to do with the confusion between direct sales and indirect sales. And it's an extremely important point when dealing with this question, because the question is social and marketing versus social and selling. The DNA braid, which is a proprietary technology of keywords. The DNA braid is essentially made up of keywords and topical themes that should be tied to your product. If you've got no product tied to those DNA braids, then really the DNA braid is not as valuable. You have to become congruent. Products should connect to your DNA braid. DNA braid should connect to your social media infrastructures and your SEO ranking, and all of those should connect to the rest of the world. Okay, so the tail that wags the dog is your product. Let me go ahead and give you another visual image about this. So to give you a better example, ignore some of these words for a moment. This is your product. Okay, that's where it all begins. This area up here, when you're wagging your industry, that is, you have an idea so powerful and an industry solution. We call this the ISDNA in our system. This could be your KDNA. That might be how you want to think about your KDNA. Okay, so you're talking about your DNA. DNA is nothing but a bunch of keywords. It's useful, but it's terribly incomplete, because if you haven't built your keyword DNA list on actual products and services in advance, then what you're really doing is affiliate marketing. And a lot of people just come and start researching keywords without knowing what their product is. Build your product first, and then the brand will follow. And then up here, stacked higher on this industry, you have a couple of decisions that you have to make. You have your personal branding empire. I call it PB, personal branding. Or you have the shield, okay, branding. Those are the two kinds of branding. Personal brand is when you use your face, behind it. You're a personal consultant, a coach, an expert speaker, or a high-paid consultant. A shield brand is when you don't have your face or your name. Like Sarah Lee, when she was running her company, or some other company that uses a personal name tied to it. Okay, it's kind of hard to go through a liquidity event if you have a personal name tied to something without selling yourself with the brand. Then you have royalty issues, micro-celebrity issues, so on and so forth. So the decision to build your brand based on a personal branding empire as a famous author versus a shield, which does not include your name and it does not include a picture of you. You're not a poster boy for your own brand. That is significantly determined based on what I call the congruency matrix, which is a proprietary technology that I use to simply guide a student through the process of building their own personal branding empire. The decision as to whether you are going to build a personal branding empire based on your face and your name versus a shield, which is an impersonal brand name, like McDonald's or something like that, is determined primarily by your product and your service array. Okay, so you have to come down here in order to determine. Okay, if your products are largely business to business, you really don't need to have your personal name tied to the brand. If your product is something that consumers use and it's a product that people tend to like to buy from somebody they know, love, and trust, or know, like, and trust, then and also if you're a professional consultant, putting your name behind something like that and your face behind something like that and becoming the poster boy is really, for your company, may be a good way to go, especially if you're a professional author or an expert consultant. Becoming that authority in that industry is the decision that you need to determine based on product. Okay, if you're working in multi-level marketing, if you're working as an expert consultant, you're a glorified salesman and you're using digital replication and digital websites to replicate yourself. And personal branding becomes a very, very important issue. Okay, so again, start with your product in order to determine whether or not your branding is going to be a personal brand empire or a shield, just a generic type of brand logo like McDonald's or Walmart or anything like that. Okay, although I think Walmart has his name in it, doesn't it? So that's not exactly, that was kind of an in-between. So that's an idea. The next step is then you get into your technical infrastructure. Okay, then you have things that people get all wrapped around the axle about, like SEO, social media, and content curation. Okay, content curation, SEO, and social media are simply ways to virally propagate your personal brand empire or your shield brand, that is your impersonal brand empire, through the various mechanisms. If you don't get your branding right, you're wasting a lot of money in SEO and social media. If you haven't determined if you're going to have a personal brand empire, meaning a logo or an image with your face or name on it, versus a impersonal brand empire, it really is hard to get traction because you're not really sure what's going on with your branding. Okay, let me see if I can give you a little example. For example, here is an idea or an example of a major large organization that was started based on an individual woman's branding. She has since removed her face from her logo and her branding, but originally this was started by a single female and based around her name, and it became a major brand, and now it's become an impersonal shield and no longer requires her face or even her participation in the business. In fact, I believe she did go through a liquidity event and no longer owns it. Okay, so this is an example of how you can look at, there's all kinds of, look at multi-level marketers as well. When you're a multi-level marketer presidential, then you really have to put your face behind things. So let's take a look. Here's Tim, let me find alt. See if we can find him. Yeah, here's Tim Allvider. Okay, here's an old site I did many years ago. I can't even believe the site is even up. But here he is. Here's Tim and Pony Allvider. They're old friends of mine. See, this is more of a personal brand. They're presidentials in Manatech. They make huge amounts of money in Manatech on a residual basis. I'm no longer into multi-level marketing, but you can see even years later as a presidential, because he's a glorified salesperson, digital and otherwise, he's got to be on his homepage because he's an expert consultant and so on and so forth. This is not, and he's also a subsidiary of a shielded brand. But the challenge with network marketing is that you've got your personal branding empire is always going to be beholden to your shield brand. Okay, so hopefully this is starting to make sense. And you asked me about social media and all this. That's not the right question. The right question is, how are you handling your personal branding empire, and do you have a personal brand empire, meaning your face behind this? Let's go ahead and look at some other things that he might have. Here's overcoming objections. Let's see. Work with Tim and Pony. Here's for example. Okay, this is a personal appeal based on him. It's got to be based on his personal brand. There he is. Okay, this is personal brand empire stuff right here. This is not a shield. He does have a logo up here, but this is not. This is a sub shield. It's kind of a partial brand, but still, Tim is the brand, and he's got his wife here on here. Okay, this is the challenge when you determine your personal branding and what your product. All of this, what he's decided to do, depends 100% on the product. Start here with the tail of the dog before you start to wag it. If you don't make a good decision on whether you're branding personally or you're branding with a shield, then you're going to probably make decisions all the way up the hierarchy that are poor. And the real question that you're asking in the Quora question area is, how does brand dissemination work together? The real question you're asking is, what is the difference between your personal brand congruency and your indirect selling versus your direct selling? By providing fantastic information, for example, here's Tim's site. It's all personal brand congruency. You can find him on Twitter, and he's able to do whatever he wants. This is his Twitter account. That's not an ethical question, as you started to pose previously. This is a place to have a conversation. There's no ethics other than what you would or would not say socially within this medium. He's got 17,000 followers. Okay, and he is able to at any time to make because he's respected by the people that follow him, he's able to create a link. Okay, and he hasn't done this well, but he's able to continually push out links, and hopefully those links lead to, it does not look like he's doing a premium content curation process here, but those links are framed within himself as the authority. And when you look at what's called neurosciences of the neuroscience or the NLP of framing is positioning yourself and your products and your services as an authority in a helpful way that is indirect sales, because leadership is sales. And by definition, Tim is a leader in that organization. Even though I don't condone or teach MLM, the fact is that he's going to make a lot of sales because he's a major leader in that organization, and he's looked up to create processes, patterns, and systems for the rest of his students. Hopefully this is beginning to make sense. Okay, and that's a little bit about how you should view personal brand empire versus indirect brand empire. It's also how you should understand the difference between direct sales and indirect sales. Never use direct selling in terms of sentence structures. For example, a direct sales would be, Manatech rocks, buy some Ambertus. If Tim said that, that would be direct selling. If he says, he's more of a business opportunity person, but let's say he was actually into the product. Let's say he recommended a book, Sugars That Heal. That's a book written that was about ambertose and the sugar, the glyconutritionals. That's an example. He could say, I read a really interesting passage in Sugars That Heal that commented blah, 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 and I didn't know this about glucose. Link. And he could link to the book, which was hanging off of this site, which had more information about joining Manatech in his MLM in its golden frame. Hopefully that makes sense, and that's contextual selling. So really, when you look at it, both contextual, in order to wag an industry, you've got to know the difference between direct selling and indirect selling. In order to wag the whole dog, wag the whole industry, you have to know that leadership is sales, and therefore thought leadership is contextual sales. So be a leader in your industry, and it will lead to contextual sales. For example, this post right here is nothing but information that I wrote here, this Storify, content curation, social media, indirect sales. It led to several relationships and a couple of closes on my products, not directly, right? People don't go here and directly buy my product. They might, but it's not that common. They're going to look through the information first, okay? They might go directly to the sign-up page, but for the most part, they're going to look around and see the contextual relationship of what I'm saying, okay? Some might view that as direct sales, but a lot of the information on this page is indirect. We've actually given information, video, so on and so forth. So what's happening right now is a major blend and difference between direct selling and indirect selling on the internet. Social media is a medium where indirect sales, that is providing value and context and true insights, will ultimately lead to somebody valuing the information that you have to say. And once you value that information, once they value that information, they may consider buying something from you as a follow-up in the future. In fact, people will oftentimes have you on their list for up to 6 months before they ever buy anything from you. But because they start to hear your distinction, your uniqueness in the industry, they'll buy something from you because what your uniqueness and your thought leadership starts to sink in. And that's why if Donald Trump says leadership is sales, Russell Wright says thought leadership is contextual sales, which is what the internet, content curation, social media, and search engine optimization, ultimately conversion, is actually about, including Google Plus and the rest. Russell Wright from networkempire.com, signing off.